a lot of top players. Is it Ram's Head? Is it the Stalagmite? Where are you going with that offhand defense?
All day, Tannen and I talked about this. Both of us leaned towards Stalagmite throughout our ProQuest season. After watching yesterday, I think I was mostly wrong. I think I have swung very far towards Ram's Head. In this matchup, I mean, you have to choose your spots for Stalagmite. You have to figure out, when is that Frostbite token really going to debilitate my opponent's turn? Otherwise, you're just not getting maximum value out of it. But speaking of maximum value, how about loading up that Pulverize with some Seismic Surges ready to go?
Yeah, there's a new one. That's called Heave. That's a brand new mechanic that's come through at Everfest. It's kind of like we said, putting that card on layaway. I'm going to pay a little bit right now. You'll see what it is. But I'm going to go ahead and get a discount on it next turn. But right out of the gate here, worth noting, Pheano comes in with a Parable of Humility and a Shimmers. The way that these Prisms want to play, typically, is they want to be able to develop 2 auras a turn, 2 auras a turn, just overwhelm your opponent, take some damage early where it doesn't matter necessarily, no on-hit effects, so you can make a lot of headway with establishing those auras, which Pheano here is doing quite well.
You have a decision as the Starvo player which auras you're going to challenge. You see, first thing that Pat was able to do, use his Winter's Wail to go after that Shimmers of Silver. And it's interesting because you'd think you spend four resources on an aura. That's always the one that's going to be higher impact, the one you're going to target. But no, Pat's prioritizing the Shimmers here. Unfortunately for Pat, follow-up Shimmers from Pheano, and Pheano already has the ball rolling. This is a massive start.
Oh, yes, definitely. We did a match like this yesterday where the Prism player did not have this kind of start. This is the hot start right out of the gate that you want to be looking for, and that looks like a fuse to me, ladies and gentlemen, as we're ready to go. We're going to fuse. That's the first thing that you do on the turn. Again, the Starvo ability comes in as the turn begins in the same kind of sequence as you would take up a Tunic. You need to get your Starvo fuse going. So the Starvo fuse occurs. Now we're going to move on to the action phase. When the action phase starts, all those Seismic Surges pop. Your next Guardian attack is going to get a 3-point haircut here in terms of the cost. So that Pulverize is for 7, and when you've got a full grip, that seems like a very digestible cost.
You assume that's where Pat's going with this turn. Certainly don't know that for sure. It's weird. You and I were talking before the match. Pulverize against Prism, not at its strongest. You really want to be just efficient with your attacks. You want to be going after auras, controlling their battlefield. Pulverize really demands you invest your entire turn in it. You see, Pat's really thinking now, am I going to produce the 7 resources to go ahead and fire off this Pulverize? And if not, is Pat going to get stuck with this in the arsenal? That's a huge problem as well. And you see, ultimately, Pat is going to load up Pulverize, send it at Pheano's face.
And what's fascinating about this is Pheano might just take this. The Parable of Humility is going to go ahead and just take a quick little haircut off the top with making that a 13 damage attack with the Parable of Humility. However, what's notable about the Pulverize is that the on-hit effect means that your first attack is -4. That first attack for Pheano could just be a one attack aura. So the on-hit is really not that scary, but this is go again and dominate. But again, Prism players, the most refined Prism players, the most disciplined Prism players, just eat damage to establish and maintain a board state. But at the same time, Pheano needs to understand here, if he's got no development cards, if he doesn't have any auras that he can go ahead and develop, he'll have to block and just eat it. But then again, having nothing in Soul and having nothing necessarily to go ahead and draw no outlet to drop a yellow pitch in your pitch zone to get go again, this could be a little bit of a very cumbersome turn for Pheano.
No, you're exactly right. And I think that's why you're seeing Pheano have such a debate here. Looks like we are just going to go ahead and throw one card in front of the Pulverize, do a little damage mitigation, but still maintaining a very strong turn. And like you mentioned, it's trivially easy for these Prism players to play through that -4. One of the reasons why I don't love Pulverize in this matchup, it just doesn't have a huge impact, short of that 12 big damage we just see taken from Pheano's life total.
It's a situation here. Pheano's got to be patient. I mean, look at the life totals. In this case, you're like, wow, Pat just went ahead, Starvo ability to Pulverize. That seems like he's in the lead, but in reality, Pheano's just like, yeah, feed me, no problem. I've got 3 auras, 3 decent auras on the board. Shimmers is one of those cards that, it's kind of like, it might not be priority 1 in terms of what you want to target, but it's certainly up there in terms of, your tier list of what Pat needs to clear out. Shimmers being a card wherein the first the first aura that you attack with will gain a +1 attack counter with it, and that can snowball. The first one comes in for 2, then 3, then 4, and depending on how you spread this out, it can get really nasty.
A Shimmers can represent so much damage over the course of a match. It's a innocuous effect, I would say. Very small buff to one of your auras, but You do that 2 or 3 times, and then the game goes an extra 6 or 7 turns from that point, and those auras don't get cleared. That's massive damage this card represents.
Damn right. As we say in Canada, pennies make loonies.
I don't know what that means, but I agree entirely.
I just made that up.
Okay.
But we don't even have pennies in Canada. But what we do have is Crown of Seeds here to go ahead and just sort of dunk on a little bit of that damage again to absorb. At the same time, Bravo is in the same regard where the Prism player here will be kind of valuing taking damage or just absorbing the damage to establish more auras. In the same regard, Bravo's going to do the same in order to keep that Starvo ability, healthy and online. But what I've noticed here is that it's really difficult because this is where it starts to get. This is the kind of board state typically that Prism will have maybe in turn 5, 6, or 7, as the Starvo player will be able to clear these out. But as it stands right now, 3 auras on the board, one of which is a Parable of Humility. That's going to help. That's going to represent a bit of life gain to a degree. And the Shimmers also pretty naughty. And then the Ode to Wrath, which just adds insult to injury on each one of those attacks.
Absolutely. And Pheano's piecing together his offense right now. And that's what this Prism deck does over time. Just more and more and more auras will join the battlefield. You see a second Pulverize pitched in this case by Pat to go ahead and activate that Crown of Seeds. Again, Flake, we talked about this maybe not being a card we love in the matchup. Second copy, though, seen from Pat, so obviously prioritizes it. It's interesting. There's some unique features of Pat's deck list as opposed to most Bravo lists, and I wonder if maybe there just aren't enough cards to cut to still have enough things going on. He has Pummels. He has 3 copies of Exposed to the Element. He has Mangles. So those cards in combination are really effective in the mirror for sure. But you might only have a few things that you're looking to take out when you come up against the Prism. And we've seen that a lot with the Bravo decks. They're really built for the mirror this weekend.
There are, I've been put into a lot of situations, for instance, but in very awkward matchups like when I was playing Starvo in the ProQuest, I match up against a Pheano, and I was like, when I was playing Prism in one particular match up against Pheano, and I'm taking out all cards that don't have, that just don't make sense, and I was like, eventually, I was down to, I'm like, I can't play a 52-card deck. Correct. I got to throw some garbage in here.
Got to play something.
Exactly, to fill it out here. There's Genesis, though. Genesis on top of that, that is a Channel Lake Frigid. Now, Channel Lake Frigid is a major boon to what Pheano wants to do here, and he's just going to go ahead and clean that up. Again, the Channel Lake Frigid is just really going to slow down what Pheano wants to do. It's no longer a situation where all your auras are going to poke in for free, that you get that free ride like that. Now you're going to be paying 1 on top, so we might see a situation here where Pat might creatively pitch to keep that Channel Lake Frigid on the board for a second turn.
I think so. I mean, keeping Channel Lake Frigid around as long as possible is the priority now. If that means using Crown of Seeds to go ahead and take a look at and try and find a second ice card, you do that. Whatever it takes to go ahead and maintain that Channel Lake Frigid, it's just enough breathing room, and it gives Pat a chance to clean up these auras. And you see, already taking out a Genesis, things are starting to get really, really wide. Hopefully, this Channel Lake Frigid is able to slow down Pheano a little bit, and Pat can play some catch-up on the next turn.
There's a situation earlier on how this game started, right? You have the 2 Pulverizes in there. You had one early. You pay the heave, but you're facing down 2 or 3 auras, and you're thinking, do I waste these seismic surges, or do I go face? And he opted to go face because the Pulverize to face, I mean, it's hard to turn that down, but what you're doing in this case is you're letting your opponent have another turn with auras and establish more. So that Pulverize felt good, but ultimately the way that a lot of players I've seen operate with the Starvo is you go face with the Starvo ability and then you swing Hammer at an aura and you continue to clean up. It's pressure cleanup, pressure cleanup. There's a nice block there with the Bastion of Eisenloft, the Stalagmite, Frostbite on top of the Channel Lake Frigid. So it's going to get expensive to do anything for Pheano.
Yeah, let's see how that impacts Pheano's turn, if that's the time to use the Stalagmite. I like the call by Pat. It's not like most equipment, ideally, you want to hold your equipment as long as possible. You use it to set up your big pivot turn to go ahead and take control of the game. You really want to choose your spots for it. Stalagmite's a little different. Stalagmite's about finding choke points for your opponent's plans. When is that Frostbite really going to throw a wrench in what they're attempting to do? And I wonder if maybe Pat found a good spot for it here.
No, you're absolutely right. And what a lot of people's debate, there are arguments in this debate of Ram's Head versus Stalagmite. People will say, well, Ram's Head will stay on the board. It could block 5, 6, 7, 8 damage over the course of a game. But in reality, in this matchup, if you're just jamming the Stalagmite there to stop the first aura attack where they have no more resources, it's blocking the 1 damage, but it's also technically responsible for blocking all the remainder damage of all the other auras that would have come after it. So you're blocking the one plus 3 or 4 auras afterwards as well. And the amount of times that Bastion of Eisenloft has saved me against a Prism that had 3 or 4 spectral shields that were coming right at my face, that stops that as well. So people need to also understand that Bastion of Eisenloft, it blocks for 3, but so much more.
Look at this, second Channel Lake Frigid going to come down. That tells me there's only one ice card here. Looking to refresh there. Going to go ahead and get in with Winter's Wail. And I think that Channel Lake Frigid turn went as Pat expected. You bought a little time, able to do some aura cleanup, reestablish your arsenal. Now you're swapping out a Channel Lake Frigid, so Pheano not going to be able to get out from under the pressure and the resource increase this card necessitates. And Pheano kind of, I would say, giving up some of that early advantage yet at this point.
No, he definitely, was able to jam some very important auras on the board. However, Pat immediately answered the Genesis. That's a major, major key piece here. Not having a Merciful Retribution can be problematic as well, given the fact that there's been nothing that's gone to Soul. So as a fail-safe to go ahead and activate all of your go-agains, you can always just pitch a yellow to go ahead and create a Spectral Shield, and then you're going to town. Unfortunately, right now, it seems like without a Merciful Retribution, without finding something like a Soul Shield, not having any of the Heralds hit, an empty Soul is, it's problematic just from an enabling perspective.
I agree 100%.
That Channel Lake Frigid is still standing tall here. Pheano has to be very aware that all of his moves are going to come with a 1-point tax here. Pat holding on to the cards. There's an arsenal there for both players. You might not be able to see it. Pheano's cards have black sleeves, so they're camouflaged. But there is an arsenal there for Pheano. And that would be an Ode to Wrath and a Parable of Humility. Parable of Humility has a 1-attack counter that it inherited from the Shimmers. That was on the board not too long ago. And that -1 attack does come in handy over time. It has been very effective. That 9-point Oakenold is now an 8, let's say. And that does, in certain cases, does factor in. Ode to Wrath right here that you can see on the screen will add 1 more point of life loss on any attack that connects. So again, an extra little tax on top of every attack that connects with Pat here. Both players are kind of just, I guess, just there might be a little issue on the board, but they're trying to thinking about what's going on and just clarifying a few things. But the board state as it is right now, Brian, looks like, I mean, the life totals are fairly even, Steven. Where would you put the players here in terms of who might be ahead right at this juncture?
I'm giving the slightest edge to Pheano right now, and it is extremely slight. I think the players are playing very close to parity. I think that really the reason I can't give the edge to Pat is I don't think his deck is really teched out for this matchup. He's got a plan, and 100% that plan can work. It's just you could tell his focus was very much on the mirror. So I think as the game goes along, you might start to see some of those weaknesses develop. And I think Pheano had a tremendous start. Now, Pat has done a good job coming back from that, and I think that's why I'm saying the advantage bar is that we're very close to parity, but still a very, very slight edge in this scenario.
The list that I'm looking at right here with Pat, there's a lot of fascinating elements to that Starvo list. There's 3 red pummels that are floating around, whether they're in this particular setup that he has going on right now. It's worth noting. But Pat also running a very fascinating combo here between 3 Expose the Elements and 3 Mangles. And those 2 cards do have a little bit of hand-holding when it comes to really messing up your opponent's game plan.
No, absolutely. I don't know that they're for this matchup. I'm not sure we're going to see these cards here. It's possible. I don't discount it. I mean, maybe Pat found a new way to just attack all of his matchups and is always leaning on that plan. The combo is sort of unexplored. We know it existed. I actually picked Expose the Elements as my breakout card for this event. I think it was poised to have a really big weekend. Maybe Pat's going to be the person who pushes that through and makes it happen.
That is a beautiful full art Herald of Protection. It's a yellow coming in for 6. On hit, it'll create a Spectral Shield and go to Soul. So that on hit effect here is really playing double duty for Pheano, as it's going to be creating another aura in the form of a Spectral Shield. But loading up that Soul, as we mentioned earlier, is so clutch in terms of just fueling your turn. It's just going to get a nice block along with, it's a 3 block with the Crown of Seeds. It's 4. So that is where I'm wondering where the rest of that block came through.
Yeah, I can't quite see the color strip on the Herald. I don't know what the base value was there. but it seems like it was a full block. Did not go to the soul.
No problems, no problems. Again, the turn's not over here. You open up with that Herald of Protection, no problem. And furthermore, moving up here, two more auras that you can swing with if necessary, but they're going to cost you. It's going to cost you because there's a Channel Lake Frigid there. So that Channel Lake Frigid has really created a situation here where Pheano is opting that pressure is more important than than a Genesis in hand or in Arsenal potentially. And we've seen this in previous games yesterday. That Genesis being pitched early, that can come back to haunt you because that is such a very crucial motor to having Pheano regain tempo and regaining board presence.
I agree with you, but I like Pheano's decision here. I think he's still putting an aura on to the field with haze bending, one of the better auras you can have when you're already getting wide a little bit. So yes, it's not Genesis, but the chances of the Genesis investment really yielding any kind of fruit, slim to none. Almost certainly going to catch a Winter's Whale attack on the next turn. When you're limited by that Channel Lake Frigid, you have to look to make the absolute most of your turns. I think Pheano did that. It may not be with the cards we expect, but able to get in a few more points of damage, able to take a few cards out of Pat's hand, and did set up a haze bending, which is now going to become a spectral shield.
Yeah, that turn looked a little bit like perhaps he took some cards to block a little bit here and there, so it's might as well just set up the arsenal. We'll come back at you next time, pitch the blink, swing a vanilla hammer at the haze bending. The haze bending upon does have the Spectra ability, or a Spectra, I guess, detriment at this point, where as soon as it's targeted by attack, adios, goodbye, but it's going to leave a little Spectral Shield as a parting gift. So there's a nice little way to just maintain some board state and absorb damage if necessary. But some key pieces that Pheano has, I'm assuming, looking for here, something like Merciful Retribution is such a key element to the aura build. And on the tier list, I mean, it's very board state dependent. Genesis typically is the top dog in terms of targets, but I find that Merciful Retribution is a close second.
Yeah, Merciful Retribution, unquestionably the best for closing out the game. It puts your opponent in a no-win situation very, very quickly with those points of damage coming through. Of course, in combination with Ode to Wrath, it can really create some amazing, amazing kills out of nowhere.
There it is. The first Spectral Shield comes through, and now it's going to be very difficult to give this go again unless the hand that Pheano has here is, there it is. We're going to go ahead and pitch a yellow, a red, and use your Tunic ability. What was pitched there looks like there's a Herald and a Miraging Metamorph, and in conjunction with the Tunic resource, there's another Parable of Humility that got snuck in there, so that's going to be pretty decent. So now all the attacks coming through for Pat are going to be at a -2 disadvantage.
Yeah, that's tough. I mean, Pat is comfortable playing a defensive game, but you do want to turn the corner with Bravo, and having -2 to all your attacks, it doesn't matter a bunch when you're going after Spectra. You're going to be fine. You're not going to have your attacks reduced where they aren't effective at clearing out those auras, but at some point, you got to deal damage. You got to win the game, and that's going to be harder and harder as we add more and more of these auras to the battlefield.
And when you're the Bravo player in these cases, you don't necessarily think that the Parable of Humility is too threatening. You're like, well, it's just -1 of my attacks. My attacks are huge. Like, what does it matter? But over time, it does add up. And I've played games where Parable of Humility on the board has essentially just dictated who wins towards the end, because that extra damage that never trickled through, or the fact that some of the cards that you would have otherwise used to pop Phantasm are no longer effective in that regard. So another attack coming through, a hammer, and we're looking to, in conjunction with the blink, again, just clean up some of the auras on the board. You got to come in with that Zamboni and just clear the field.
Yeah, the blinks or time skippers or lead the chargers are so critical in this matchup for taking care of multiple auras in a turn. It's how you get back to parity. You see Pat really not looking that bad again, has done a nice job catching up. Channel Lake Frigid slowed down the onslaught for a little while, and now Pheano's got to see if we can rebuild. That's what it's going to be in this matchup. It's just this constant ebb and flow, clearing auras, making auras, clearing auras, making auras, and then at some point the game's going to be decided on these razor-thin margins. People talk about Prism being favored in this matchup. I agree. I think Prism is favored. I think the gap is oftentimes overstated. I think these matchups are extremely close, extremely skill-dependent, extremely plan-dependent from both players.
We're pitching a yellow and a red unmovable here with the Prismatic Shield. Another card of debate, of sort of a piece of flavor that everyone, it's an acquired taste for some players to play Prismatic Shield, to just pay 3 for 3 shields. But when you're playing an aura build, having 3 auras on the board that, in this case, can soak damage and perhaps prevent some on-hits, very important. So 4 of those Spectral Shields, and they had the go again, but looks like we're just going to go ahead and pass the turnover. Time skippers. Here we go. More cleanup coming through. Time skippers, of course, on the action. Pitch 3, gain 2 action points. Now, Spectra in general will go ahead and, when you're hitting the Spectra, it will negate the go again upon the completion or the resolution of that attack. But having an extra action point in your back pocket allows you to go ahead and make the cleanup. So Pat doing another good job here of, just crushing all the hopes and dreams of Pheano. Like everything that was built. The way it's like Pheano's at the beach and he's building the sandcastle, and Pat here is just the waves that come in and crash on it. So Pheano's got to be quick in terms of rebuilding this. Otherwise, he's just going to be lost in the tide of Pat's onslaught of these big Starvo attacks that we haven't seen really since the first turn.
No, I think you're exactly right. It's just holding pace, clearing auras, and then you wait. You bide your time, you wait till that Bravo ability comes online and just makes you these big offensive turns with very little recourse for your opponent because they're backed up by Dominate. More damage than you would expect because we're getting +2 from the Bravo ability. So it really is like a single-handed turn the corner mechanism. It functions as this catch-up thing. It functions as a disruption thing. It's such an impactful hero ability, and that's why Bravo's cut out such a place in this metagame for itself.
Here comes a Herald opening up the turn. It's a Herald of Protection. On-hit Spectral, on-hit Soul. Still nothing in Soul going on over here. Now, I'm wondering here, now that Pat has essentially cleaned up all those important auras, the non-token auras, Pat's got to be hoping to start picking up the pace here, finding those Oaken Olds and fusing and, really jamming the pressure in. He does have 4 Spectral Shields that he'll have to answer. And, having a red Autumn's Touch or something in that regard to just plow through them. But there it is. There's the Oaken Old, but that's coming in as a block.
Yeah, I mean, that's not what you want your Oaken Olds to do. There's more in the deck. I mean, that's what has been missing from Pat's plan, right? It's the Oaken Olds, it's the Spinal Crushes, it's just the big Swingbacks Crippling Crush. Should that still be in the deck at this point? There's got to be some way to go ahead and start the pressure against Pheano.
So 4 more little sneaky attacks coming through with the Spectral Shields. Right now, there it is. The life totals have been updated. There was a little bit of a delay on that, but it's all good. But hey, how about an Awakening? Now we're talking with a fuse. So
there you go.
So 6 Seismic Surges with the fuse, double that up to 12. Hey, I like pulverizes, and you know what I like better about pulverizes? Not paying a dime for a pulverize.
If it's free, it's me, baby, and I'm looking for those free pulverizes. You see, another copy for Pat. Saw one played earlier, saw one pitched earlier. Of course, the pitched one back in the deck, ready to be grabbed with Awakening, and this is exactly what we were talking about. It's time to start exerting some pressure on Pheano. Now, what do you think about the decision to go pulverize over something like, say, Spinal Crush? That's a little bit more disruptive. Something like Crippling Crush, should it be in the deck? I don't know that these cards are in the deck. I'm assuming at least Spinal Crushes. I think that's a great tool for this matchup.
In this case, I genuinely believe that the first thing that you need to worry about is just clearing out those auras. If you're going for something that has a very devastating on-hit effect, having 4 Spectral Shields is going to soak a lot of that damage, so the Crush effect probably is not going to go down. If you don't have a Starvo fuse, you're not going to be able to punch through and get the benefit. I think in this case, you just get the pulverize because it's just 14 pure and simple damage that is going to not only start threatening the life total, but it's going to clean up those 4 Spectral Shields. The on-hit is still most likely going to occur. It's not necessarily going to be terribly valuable unless Pheano decides to come in with a Herald, but just pulverize for 14 is one nasty way to go ahead and just sweep up all of those Spectral Shields that have been tickling you in the wrong way for a few turns now.
No, I think you're exactly right. I think the Spectral Shield is what pushes you just towards the pure damage here. You have to get those off the field, otherwise it's going to eventually kill you. That's the way this works, is if you don't answer the Spectral Shields, you're going to die a death by 1,000 cuts.
Yeah, the Prism is the new Katsu, it seems. They just do it better in this case. Is those Spectral Shields coming in for 1 damage apiece. And what we meant, like you mentioned earlier, and when this gets to the late game and you can find a Merciful Retribution, it's a no-win scenario in many cases. So damned if you do, damned if you don't. In this case, Pulverize is a very, very sweet way to jam in, clean up those Spectral Shields, and push damage. If you get the on-hit, that just means that the first Herald, if they want to play a Herald, is going to be relatively punchless.
Feels like Pheano's debating a sizable block here. Maybe thinking about just committing the entire hand and taking a turn cycle off.
Well, that's a dangerous move, man. If you're going to give him the whole hand and Pat still has 2 cards, that means that there's an arsenal coming up. You can also pitch to go ahead on Pheano's turn to maybe recalibrate the 3 elements you need for that fuse, and then it could get away from you here. That's a dangerous game that you're playing here, but the good news here for Pat is absorbing 4 of those Spectral Shields is a very, very key part of this game plan.
I agree. Pheano ultimately decides no blocks, just going to go ahead, take that aggression on the chin. Life totals getting very, very comparable at this point. You know, you asked me before who I thought was in the lead. I said super narrow advantage to Pheano. I'm still there. I still think there's a super narrow advantage to Pheano, but it's gotten even more narrow. And the game is inches away from being just a 50-50 toss-up.
Yeah, I believe that the scores might be a little bit more lopsided than they're represented right now, as I think they're just going ahead and figuring out what the pulverize, the effect on the pulverize. But that pulverize, I don't believe there was a block declared, and Pheano has his full grip here. So as it stands, like we said, those are both pulverizes that were played. And typically, if you're playing against a Starvo and they've pulverized you twice, it's not looking too good. So Pheano did keep the entire hand here, opting to just pitch, play the Parable of Humility, again, giving a -1 haircut on all of the attacks coming through, and then we're going to drop a Passing Mirage to finish that out. These are those ideal turns that Prism wants. May not be the ideal blue, but at least it's a start.
Yeah, 2 auras, that's the gold standard. You make 2 auras a turn, looking really good. Speaking of looking really good, how about double pulse?
Why not? Double pulse coming through. It might not be the blue pulse that you want, but you're getting the Starvo effect online. The pitch might be a little awkward. What's coming out of... all right, so that's, I believe, a blue evergreen. Yep, so it's 5 base, but it gets the +2 bonus from the Starvo. Now, keep in mind, Parable of Humility is going to just shave 1 of that attack off of it, but it's still 6... dominate, go again. That's a good start to any turn.
Yeah, it looked like that was headed towards the Parable of Humility. I thought I saw Pat reach out and tap that, which would mean there's no chance for any kind of blocks here. But I may be wrong on that because it does seem like Pheano's debating something.
Well, the cards in his hand right now is a yellow and a red pulse, right? So the follow-up with a hammer is not going to make sense because you don't want to pitch 2 pulses to swing a hammer to kill a Parable of Humility or to kill a Passing Mirage. That just leaves you with no arsenal. It leaves you with no, fuse consistency by having a pulse in hand. So I believe that this is the right play in this regard because it affords you an arsenal and a pulse in hand to maintain some of that consistency on your fuses.
Yeah, that's a fine setup. I think you're exactly right.
But 6 is 6. I mean, you're tossing out one of the weaker attacks that you would have probably wanted to throw out here. I think that if in this case, I truly believe that if that card was like an Okanold or something else, it would have gone directly to face.
Oh, absolutely.
Do not pass go, do not collect $200. Just go directly to Prism's face, and then we'll follow up with something else, or we'll arsenal. But in this case, it has to be attacking one of these auras.
Looks like we're going to see a pitch 3.
Oh no, he was going to face
shield
here.
Okay, he was going to be aggressive with the Evergreen, and the follow-up is going to be Winter's Wail taking out that Parable.
Okay, so, sorry about the little mix-up here. That he did have the blue pulse here, so the Ice-Earth pulse was in the hand, so he does be able to clear it up. A little bit of, sometimes a lot of the pulses, they're all so beautiful. It's hard to choose. So I just like him also. A little bit of a mistake there, but it's all good to go. And now, so the damage went to face. It was blocked by the Soul Shield. And then we go swing in with the hammer, clean up. Now, there's a Passing Mirage still on the board. That does negate the Phantasm of the first Illusionist attack.
Yeah, let's see if it's time for like a Herald of Erudition. That could be the way to start the train going, especially backed up by that Passing Mirage. But no, it's just more auras.
Not even attacking with the auras either. I believe that there was... Oh, he pitched a blue. Okay, that's why. So pitching the blue, creating the Spectral Shield, and coming in with a Haze Bending. Again, establishing the aura presence is the game plan for Pheano.
Yeah, it looks like Pat's looking to activate Crown of Seeds, prevent that little plink. Nope, just going to pass on it, take the damage.
Seems like it. All right, no problem. Likes his Arsenal card. I believe the Arsenal card is the red Pulse. We're going to go with the Flash here, giving an attack that has 2 or more costs. Go again. No, it's the red Autumn. It's a red break round. It's going to come in for 7. Go again. No Dominate, no Starvo ability here, no problem. So just 7. Go again. You do have the Spectral Shield here to cushion some of this. I mean, it's just vanilla damage. In this case, do you think that Prism's just going to eat this?
It really depends on the texture of Pheano's hand. If it means getting more auras onto the field, almost certainly. Like this is the spot where you want to not block because you have to react to things like Oaken Old, like Crippling Crush, like Spinal Crush. Those things demand an answer. Something like Break Ground, you can just let go, and you're probably going to lose one of your auras here because it does have Go Again thanks to the Flash, but you can live with that. You can take this damage, and you can use your resources to, again, expand your battlefield, which is what Pheano really wants to be doing.
Now, when you're staring down an Ice Hero, typically you're hearing Elsa in your ear saying, let it go, let it go. That's kind of what Pat's hoping here, just to connect for some damage, and that seems to be the case. One of those Spectral Shields is going to tank 1 piece of damage, and then we're just going to eat the rest, which is 6. No more blocks, no problem. But there is going to be a follow-up here. That Go Again in conjunction with the Flash. I'm thinking that Haze Bending is not meant for this world.
Yeah, assume there's going to be some more cleanup here. There you see Winter's Wail headed right towards it. Going to get a Spectral Shield to replace it.
Yeah, an effective turn altogether. You managed to go ahead, create more pressure to the life total, and you're cleaning up some of those auras. Haze Bending, another very strong one because it leaves a parting gift when it exits the battlefield here. So as it stands, we're going to go back to work here for Pheano.
I'm going to point out something important. Pheano's life total looks lower, and it is. But at the same time, equipment remains untouched. Have that Arcanite Skull Cap ready for some big blocks. Have the Gauntlets ready to step in front of things. Footsteps has not been used thus far in this matchup. So really good defensive options still available for Pheano.
Part of this is just he hasn't needed to use it.
Exactly right.
You haven't found an Oaken Old. You haven't found any of those on-hit effects. And we've seen Pat pop one of the Heralds with an Oaken Old. So there's one use of the Oaken Old. There's 2 more floating around in that deck, I would imagine. And he just needs to find them. I think that it's just a situation right now where Pat swung 2 pulverizes. I mean, you have to be happy about that to a degree, but it's the on-hit effects that really are what makes this Starvo build so oppressive. It's where you can't block, and the on-hits are so detrimental. There's Spinal Crush, and Spinal Crush, Brian, has some significant repercussions.
Yeah, it'll slow down Pheano's entire turn, of course, taking away Go Again from all actions. It makes it almost impossible for Pheano to get those big value turns that Prism lives off of. Certainly impossible to get wide with your auras and get a bunch of attacks in. So, like I mentioned before, when the damage is just vanilla, 7 damage headed towards Pheano's face, you're happy to trade off life totals. When it's something like Spinal Crush, you're way more incentivized to block because this represents giving up your entire next turn, and that's not what Pheano wants to be doing right now.
There's no Go Again, there's no Dominate on this attack, so it's just going to face because basically the on-hit effect is what is essentially going to really limit Pheano's reach in the next turn. As you see there, the Crush effect. Crush effects occur when 4 or more damage is dealt by the card. Now, there's a Spectral Shield there that can soak it through, so with 8 essential attack coming through, you need to block 5. This could be a 3-block and a Skull Cap that can rescue this turn if necessary.
Yeah, I think this is a fine spot for Skull Cap. I think Pheano's maybe looking in that direction, but just going to go ahead and use 2 cards from hand. Obviously, it always depends on the texture of your hand. You're trying to set up your next turn with your block, so if you don't have a real use for all these blues, very blue-heavy hand here for Pheano, you just go ahead and use it, and you save the Skull Cap to fight another day.
And there's that Merciful Retribution. So Pat's the aggressor here, but he's gonna be the one taking damage. So 1 damage based on the fact that Spectral Shield bit the dust. Merciful Retribution will deal 1 arcane damage whenever one of those auras is gonzo. So that is, like you mentioned, late game pressure on the defensive turn, very effective.
Yeah, and now it makes perfect sense why this is the way Pheano chooses to block. Has the yellow to pitch, drops down the Miraging Metamorph, going to get that big attack in. try and push a little damage. Of course, this is the no-win situation. You want to go ahead and pop Phantasm here? Well, you're going to put another Merciful Retribution on the battlefield. And I don't think you can do that right now. I think that's terrifying if you're on Pat's side.
But even if he wanted to, he couldn't. There's not only one passing Mirage on the
That's
board.
a great point, Flake.
There are two passing Mirages.
Yeah, not even an option.
Just in case he needed a reminder that, yeah, you're eating this damage. But in this case, that could have been almost, I don't say detrimental to Pheano, but coming in with a passing Mirage, you're happy to a degree if they actually pop that Miraging Metamorph.
No, I think you're right.
You're taking a big attack out of the hand, and you're doubling up on a Merciful Retribution. So I think you're happy either way, frankly.
Yeah, no-win situation. I mean, that's what Miraging Metamorph creates over and over again.
Both these players sitting at 7-0. They went undefeated yesterday. Pat Eshghy on Bravo, Pheano Black on Prism. Frankly, all three 7-0s today were, like you mentioned, Brian, just completing that triangle of doom. One of each, the Viserai, the Prism, and the Bravo at the top of the heap here. This is really a battle of titans to start off day 2 here in Indianapolis at the Calling, as the life totals really dwindling, very equal here. And what's fascinating here as well is the fact that really, we've seen one awakening already. There's possibly some more coming down the line, but it's never going to happen because, frankly, Pat's been on top of the heap here in terms of life total the whole way. I feel like perhaps, maybe Awakening was one of those throw-in cards. Like, I need to put something in. Maybe if I fall behind, this can catch me up.
Yeah, this is one of the problems as I see it with Awakening, and we've seen some players move away from it specifically in this matchup. Some have just taken it out of the deck altogether. So I understand both schools, and I also have had Awakening absolutely steal games for me. So it's really hard to find exactly what you want to do with it. What's not hard, though, is the decision to go ahead and get these Spectral Shields onto the battlefield, because that's going to let Pheano's next turn go particularly wide.
Oh boy, no Merciful Retribution on the board anymore, unfortunately, but that's a Prismatic Shield in conjunction with a Merciful Retribution makes for some very awkward turns to swallow for Pat here, but there it is, again, continually just dumping auras on the board. Now Pat's at a deficit here, 12-10 in favor of Pheano Black on Prism. There's another Miraging Metamorph, another possible no-win situation, but again, you cannot. There is. I believe he already attacked with the Phantasm.
You're correct.
So the text on Passing Mirage says that the first illusionist attack, and that includes the auras. Those are illusionist attacks. So even though they didn't have Phantasm, well, they can't lose or gain Phantasm. They lose or can't gain Phantasm. So that Miraging Metamorph now is kind of that. It's kind of that lure. It's that carrot on a stick saying, you can pop it if you want, but I'm just going to make another aura. But these auras that are on the board are less frightening.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think that's what was driving Pat's decision here to go ahead and pop that Miraging Metamorph. It's going to make a copy of either a Spectral Shield or a third Passing Mirage, which is just a no-value thing. I think you take the Spectral Shield here.
Yeah, you definitely take the Spectral Shield here, and that's exactly what he's doing. You can go ahead and copy the Spectral Shield. He's got 4 and another one swinging in, so another damage poked through here. Pat on 9. So this has been a different thing. And again, let's go back to the evaluation. Who do you think is in the lead now?
It remains razor tight, and this is going to maybe be a big swing in Pat's direction. Depends what the follow-up is here. You see a Starvo activation.
That's a good start here for Pat, who's playing catch-up now, as he's going to go ahead and pitch. Ooh, Spinal Crush.
This is big. This is the first time that Starvo has really delivered a meaningful on-hit. Sure, Pulverize is huge damage. That -4 doesn't do a whole lot. If this Spinal Crush takes away Pheano's next turn, this is where Pat can really seize the initiative.
And beautiful part here is that there's 4 Spectral Shields on the board here for Pheano and a Skull Cap. Now keep in mind that Skull Cap is only worth 1 now because Pat has dipped below the health total of Pheano. So Skull Cap only blocking for 1.
Oh, but here's a big exchange. Merciful Retribution coming down for Pheano.
Oh, a little hocus pocus here, a rabbit out of the hat saying, all right, you're going to get the raw end of the deal here as well. And when you're below 10 there in single digits, eating all that arcane damage is nasty. And there's really no way to block it because the only way to really deal with it would have been with Crown, but there's nothing in the arsenal. So it looks like Pat's going to get the raw end of the stick here as well.
With that Merciful Retribution, now I move things firmly in Pheano's favor, because what is left for the rest of this turn is defensive options, and it's even better than I thought. It's Soul Shield being used on that Spinal Crush, can go ahead and line up some equipment as well, or you can just use the Spectral Shields to negate what's going to be the effect of that Spinal Crush. And if that Spinal Crush isn't hitting, that means you're getting more attacks next turn, and you're now at a precarious life total due to that Merciful Retribution.
Here it comes. All right, and if necessary, if you're Pheano here, you're happy to take the one. The crush effect is not going to really. It's not going to go off at all. We're so familiarized with Oakenold's on-hit ability of anything that bleeds through will have a detriment. Crush is not like that. It needs to be 4 or more. Soul Shield is going to do a great job of soaking up a lot of that damage, as well as those Spectral Shields. And at the end of the day, Pat must have felt like, okay, this is my turn. I've got a fused Starvo into a crippling Crush. Let's go. Let's get at him. And just like that, Pheano just sneaks in that Merciful Retribution with four Spectral Shields on the board to really make this turn detrimental to Pat.
Now, here's the only thing that is working against Pheano. That took all of the cards in hand. So it isn't going to be that go wide turn from Prism next, where you're able to go wide, get a bunch of attacks in. And I think that's influencing this decision from Pat with that Winner's Wail. That's going face. That's going to go after Pheano.
Well, I mean, you're going to sneak in some damage over here, which is perfectly fine because, like you mentioned, there's only one attack coming through for one, and if Pat has an arsenal, he can just eat that with the Crown of Seeds. So
we're not even going to attack for one because if Pheano has no hand, you can't do anything under that Frostbite.
Right, there's a Frostbite there that just locks up the entire hand. So Pat's just getting a time walk situation here. Just say, let's go again. Why not? The whole turn gets go again.
Yeah. So now, having seen how that played out, I'm sort of pushing things back in Pat's favor. I think nothing was really done there to advance Pheano's position. Like, it did a good job getting in some damage, and I think that's important. But now Pat's going to have a chance to clean up this Merciful Retribution. And as long as Pat is able to do that, then I like the position he's in.
Oh, it's been a masterful game by both players over here.
You see why they're 7-0. I mean, it's very clear.
Precisely, and that we could not have asked for a better match to start the day here on day 2 of the calling in Indianapolis. We're just going to go in. I believe that's a Winter's Bite saying, hey, pay one or get lost in this case, and that can be detrimental as well because those cards that you're basically getting for free a card out of hand. There's no other way for them to pay. The Tunic's only at 1, so it's looking pretty good here, and I'm hoping here that if Pat has a follow-up, that it's something a little bit more potent than just a Winter's Wail. But then again, a Winter's Wail, it's not bad, I suppose. Oh, he's going for the Merciful. Okay, so he's still, playing it a little bit safe here, and I like that play. Merciful is essentially what could have turned your big turn into a nightmare.
Absolutely. I think that's the priority right now, is going into your next turn cycle without having to worry about Merciful Retribution.
Still a Haze Bending on the board as well. That's a nice little parting, again, like we said, parting gift, just dropping some Easter eggs as they exit the stage left here. But in this case, did he not put the... There should be I believe there should be a Spectral Shield on the board.
May have missed the trigger there, possibly.
Looks like that's the case. We've just skipped over that. Okay, so it looks like Pheano may have just been a little bit too preoccupied with his own turn here. I think that's a Haze Bending. No, he's looking at it, but he's attacking with it. So
yeah, we're on Pheano's turn now.
Yeah, so that could have been a missed opportunity because it's not just one extra damage soaked, it's one extra damage delivered. As we see here, the Haze Bending. Whenever Haze Bending or another illusionist non-token aura you control is destroyed, create a Spectral Shield. That's Merciful Retribution, and it ate the dust. But Haze Bending should have dropped a Spectral Shield as a little candy on the ground there. But it looks like Pheano may have missed that.
This could be a big difference maker. I mean, that's an important effect.
Oh, it's definitely an important effect. And in this case, pitching to go ahead and create a Spectral Shield. You would have had 2 on the board, and you would have been threatening an additional point of damage, and not to mention...
And soaking a point of damage.
Exactly.
I mean, it's a big, big swing. And, maybe we're 8 rounds deep into this tournament now. You start to fatigue a little bit. That's one of the things... It doesn't get said enough. To be great at card games, you have to have stamina. You have to be able to go long. You have to be able to not only play great a few games, you have to play great every game. And that's such a huge, huge ask. And small mistakes like that, they're going to happen. They happen to all of us. You can't feel bad about it, but when they do happen in such critical situations, it can be a real heartbreaker. These
players played 7 rounds yesterday. They're playing 5 more today, and then they're going to the top 8. So there is almost, it's unfair to ask for a flawless let alone game, but a full tournament. So
absolutely.
These players are going to make some mistakes or have certain areas where a trigger is missed because there's so much going on. We'll see how that plays out. It looks like Pheano's in a good spot over here. We did Blizzard the go again and block, so it looks like Pat here might have a hand that he likes, and he's asking Pheano in this case to pay for the further attacks.
Yeah, I think Pheano has already pitched to pay for the Blizzard, so that second Spectral Shield coming in going to be blocked by the Crater Fist. 2 more attacks behind for Pheano. So we got to see it. Does Pat want to really play with fire, drop down to 1, let these 2 effects go through, or is it time to line up some more blocks? Obviously, that'll cost resources at this point.
I'm wondering what Pat's looking for here. He might be wondering, he hasn't seen a Herald of Erudition. That might be, if Pheano has a Herald of Erudition in hand right now, committing the Crater Fist to this Spectral Shield means that there's no safe block for that Herald of Erudition, and that could be lights out for in this particular turn.
Yeah, those passing Mirages have been on the battlefield essentially all game, and at a time where you could really, really use a Spectra effect, not going to have it. So let's see what the follow-up is here. I think it's only 1 card left for Pheano, so it's just going to be Arsenal and pass. Oh, this is big from Pat. It's Awakening time.
Pheano now, we're going to see if that Spectral Shield, it was a hero that we just missed. In this case, we're going to go ahead and create 12 Spectral Shields. Awakening is basically a catch-up card. You're going to play it as an instant, fuse it with Earth, double up the create Seismic Surges that are equal to the difference in life total. If you fuse it, double it up. So 12 Seismic Surges means you're getting a pretty hefty discount here on your next attack. What do you think he's hunting for here?
It looks like Crippling Crush. I already pulled the Crippling Crush to the front. I assume that means there's probably not more Pulverizes left in the deck. I think they're probably all used at this point because you just want maximum damage here if you're on Pat's side. I want to mention something. It's possible there's a small chance that Pheano didn't want the Spectral Shield in that scenario. And the reason being is you may want to bait Pat into a scenario where you can get that 1 damage through with a Merciful Retribution. Now, how does the timing work, Flake? Should that Spectral Shield prevent 1 damage? Would it still be Pat's game at that point because the damage would go through from the attack before the Spectral Shield had a chance to trigger Merciful Retribution?
I have seen this occur at a ProQuest where it was basically, the damage gets stacked, but typically the physical damage would come through. That's a good question, frankly.
Okay, well, if it happens, we'll see. That'll be the answer.
That is a fascinating question because technically the damage should be calculated, the physical damage should be calculated, and then the arcane damage should be stacked beneath it.
That would be my expectation.
Yeah, so basically a player who's dead cannot deal damage to the player who's left standing, as far as I understand here. So, but 11 go again here off the flash. This is going to be difficult for Pheano to digest here. This might be a situation where, well, you still have your Ironhide gloves, you still have your skull cap, albeit just for 1. Do you just donate your slippers here and say, don't need them, don't care? Is it a full equipment donation here? We're going to see how this goes, but that is a hefty attack, and I feel like Pheano may have benefited from that extra Spectral Shield here.
Yeah, I'm trying to find the silver lining here, Flake. I'm trying to find some scenario where
absolutely.
it was beneficial.
No, definitely. That does definitely make sense to a degree where maybe the cards that he had in hand, he could have been baiting it out to a degree, but ultimately, sometimes being those situations where you're maybe overthinking yourself. You're basically outplaying your own game.
Right.
So in this case, an 11-point Crippling Crush. Now, it's not an Oak and Old, which means that it has to be 4 or more damage coming through, and it's not dominated. So there's the silver lining in that case.
Yeah, it did have the Immovable in Arsenal, though, and that's a big block for Pheano at a critical time.
Big tech cards, Unmovables, that kind of at the beginning of this meta with Everfest wasn't necessarily an auto-include in many Prism lists, but the value of that card has been immeasurable in this case, as out of Arsenal, it's going to be coming in with a +1 defense value, so that's 8, plus the 3 from the Herald. That's a full block, just clean and clear.
Early on, we saw people trying to get away with yellow Unmovables for the yellow pitch strip, obviously, to benefit from the Prism ability, but somewhere along the line, it became clear you just need as much block as possible, and Pheano got it there at a critical moment.
All right, so just opening up with an attack here, and that's fine. No problem. Come in.
But we're in the Kodachi spot now. Like, this is the problem. Every single time Pheano queues up one of these auras, Pat has to find an answer, and it's such a painful spot to be in.
Now, a nice little cheeky play here again. At the before damage resolution, you add instant speed. You're going to use the Prism ability, putting a yellow pitch to create another Spectral Shield, which basically at this point enables the go again. So the Luminaris will give it a go again. Haze Bending now coming in for the 1, which was absorbed by the Seeds. And Pat, in response to that, is say, all right, Blizzard, pay 2, which was immediately done at lightning speed. Just in the same instant speed that Blizzard was played, you saw the instant response there from Pheano saying, basically, yeah, I think I got this.
And Pheano's out of cards now, but there's attack that still has to be dealt with. There's 4 more attacks queued up behind, and Pat has to answer every single one of them individually.
And this is my favorite body language. It's Pheano with the arms crossed saying, okay.
Yeah, look what you're getting here from Pheano's hand. So much. And you saw a little celebratory pump from Pheano.
Yep.
Out of equipment now, and strongly in Pheano's favor is this game.
And what's very important here is nothing in Arsenal to activate Crown of Seeds to potentially block some of the damage coming through. That also is going to be important, given the fact that, yeah, like you said, death by 1,000 cuts. It's basically just, it's the new Kodachis. It's the new Kodachis, and it's nasty to deal with, especially when there's so many of them.
I'm going to say Pat found the best possible clapback you could get here. Oaken Old is as much damage as you could represent from this 2-card hand, but I think it's just going to be pretty easy for Pheano to block out from here. You still have all this equipment ready to go, by the way, so a huge equipment advantage to Pheano right now. That means Pat's going to have no arsenal on the next turn and is still facing down so much aggression from Pheano, especially if Pheano finds a way to protect these Spectral Shields and head into the next turn with those at the ready. Question's really, is there a yellow in hand? And is there a way to utilize it for Pheano?
Oh, that would be a nightmare scenario for Pheano here, is if he drew reds and blues and just didn't have a way to activate go again. He's got a soul loaded up, so that's basically the entry fee right there. That's the way. That's your ticket to victory potentially. But I like this Oakenold here because, again, it's 7. It's not the most clean and clear cut block, and if it can eat up 2 Spectral Shields, that's 2 less attacks that you have to potentially deal with. So Pat really putting up a fight here, and I think that it's not over yet. He's going to block with a full 7.
Full 7, yep.
So I'm thinking he's got that yellow in hand to go create the soul. And
I think so, and if you looked at his hands, they were trembling too. You could see the excitement from Pheano. There is a yellow pitch.
It's all good. They fist bumped, and I think it's all done. He's basically showing he's like, I got it.
Yep. And Pat knows the writing's on the wall, and that's going to be Pheano Black.